Since this is the closing session, I wanted to take a couple of minutes and add to the thank yous that Laura gave this morning. The conference was sponsored by generous donations from the Society of Christian Philosophers, Calvin College, the John Templeton Foundation, and the Notre Dame Philosophy Department, and we're grateful to all of those institutions for making this whole thing possible. Most of the logistics for the conference were dealt with by Joyce Zarowski, our program coordinator, and James Helmer, one of the graduate students who's been working for us this semester. Joyce in particular usually runs out when we're going to thank her, but she's right back there, and I'm going to point her out. She does all kinds of things for the center, and the conferences, when they go well, it is almost entirely due to her hard work behind the scenes, getting everything to work out really smoothly. So we're really thankful that she does all that for us. I'd also like to thank the graduate students who drove people to and from the airports and helped out in other ways. In particular, I just want to name them instead of thanking them generically. And Andrew Bailey, Brad Rettler, Ron Belgau, Alex Arnold, and Jeremy Neal, he's a visitor here, but they all helped us quite a lot with this. So I just want to say thanks to them too. Two quick announcements. Some of the conference participants were given gift cards. I want to remind you to return those at the end to Joyce Zarowski. Second, the banquet. You probably all know this, but I thought the banquet was in the Morrison. It turns out it's on the lower level of this very building. So if you are totally confused like I was, now you're not. I'll get to say more about Al tonight, but I suppose I'll just say right now, and thanks to Al for existing and having the career that he's had that made all of this possible too.
My name's Andrew Chignell. I'm going to let Nick explain why there's no commentator up here at the beginning of his talk. I'm rather going to just say, follow in the tradition of the chairs of these sessions and say something about what I feel I owe to Al. And I think it's fitting that I'm going last here because whereas many people have said they owe lessons learned or inspiration in various ways to Al, I feel, and I will now demonstrate, that I owe my intellectual, professional, emotional, physical, and spiritual well-being to Al. So the story goes like this. The Pew Foundation, back when I was in college at Wheaton, had a program whereby Christian college students could go for the summer to study with major researchers at big universities like this one. And I had the chance to go to study either with a literary theorist or with Al Plantinga. I was a literature and philosophy double major, but was very much heading in the literature direction and taking literary theory classes and very interested in those sorts of things. But Jay Wood, who was my teacher and the moderator for the first session, said, if you have a chance to study with Al Plantinga, you have to do it, and so I did that. And I showed up here and talked to Al about Derrida once, and he said something about, I don't know too much about him, but I have the book Postcards, and I feel as though he's a great cartoonist. I don't know if you remember that. So I was, of course, outraged, and we had a number of discussions, but I was quickly converted to the kind of clarity and wonderful rigor with which Al and analytic philosophers conduct themselves, and ended up going in that direction. He wrote a recommendation for me to go and study with Nick, and the rest is history. So I figured that if I hadn't gone to study with Al here in my junior year, I would have been professionally going on to do postmodern literary theory. And so he saved me professionally. Because I would be doing postmodern literary theory, and the job market is so bad in English, and I probably wouldn't have ultimately loved it that much, I would also be unemployed. And so he saved me professionally and financially. Because I would be unemployed and a postmodern literary theorist, I probably would have become bitter and depressed. And so he saved me emotionally as well as financially and professionally. Because I would have been bitter and depressed, I would probably have started drinking a lot and had become an alcoholic. And so I figure he saved me physically as well as emotionally and financially and professionally. And then, inevitably probably have given up my faith and become a godless naturalist. And so he saved me spiritually as well as physically, emotionally, financially, and professionally, which is more than any of the rest of you can say, I think. That said, I should point out, yes.
Athletically?
Well, we did go rock climbing once, yeah, so that was also... Unfortunately, it may be that Al wouldn't be so approving of what has turned out. I mean, I didn't go to Notre Dame in the end. I went to Yale and studied with Nick, and so I've become, instead of a professional literary theorist, I'm a professional Kant scholar, which, if you've read Al's first 2 chapters in Warranted Christian Belief, he may not think is that much better than a professional theorist. But I am employed as opposed to unemployed, reasonably happy as opposed to bitter and depressed, occasionally tipsy as opposed to an alcoholic, and an Episcopalian as opposed to a godless naturalist. So a little bit better. So thank you, Al. It's a great honor for me to introduce one of my own mentors and friend, Nicholas Wolterstorff, to speak on the topic Then, Now, and Al.
Thanks, Andrew. And I have to begin by apologizing in public, as I have in private, for bumping Mark Murphy there off the program. When I decided to write this sort of paper, I'm not exactly sure what genre it fits under. But anyway, this sort of paper instead of the other sort of paper, and the organizers allowed me to do it, commentator became irrelevant. So, Mark, my apologies. My project in this talk is first to describe how philosophy was like in the 1950s, when Al Plantinga was a graduate student and entered the ranks of professional philosophers, and then to pinpoint the contribution Al's work has made to the difference between philosophy then and now. I'll forego describing what philosophy is like today. Most people in the audience know that at least as well as I do. And to those who don't, let me console you by saying that a fairly good picture of the relevant parts of philosophy will emerge in the course of my discussion. Though what I say will necessarily incorporate a synopsis of some of the high points of Al's work, my aim is not to give a synopsis. Others have done that in various books and prefaces to books and so forth, but to make a foray into the dark and treacherous area of historical influence. And unlike Robin Collins yesterday, I want to confine myself to actual influence. I will not engage in counterfactual speculations. I will not ask how philosophy today would have been different had Al not existed, or how it would have been different had he become, say, a Freudian therapist or a Wall Street banker instead of a philosopher. Those are distant possible worlds, I realize. And I should make clear at the beginning the vantage point from which I will be speaking. Some of you know this. Al and I have known each other since the fall of 1950, when we were sophomores together at Calvin College. So when I describe what philosophy was like in the 50s, I'm basing my description on what he and I have both experienced and not on historical research. This is what it felt like. And given that we entered philosophy at the same time, when I describe the contribution Al's work has made to the difference between philosophy then and now, I'll be describing developments that we both have lived through. I will try to describe them in such a way that even those who know little of anything about these movements, changes, will be able to follow most, at least, of what I say. I hope that this doesn't bore the learned among you, but I do think it important that the story be told outside the walls of analytic philosophy. In the coffee break, one of you asked me whether the story you had heard was true, that Al and I were the only two students in a philosophy course taught at Calvin College by Harry Gelman, and that is true. We both had German copies of the Pure Critique and the Kemp Smith translation, took them both